Welcome to the Chaos Sector. We return to the Matrix. We're trying to address several things right now, but it's so many absurdities in all of these unsealed documents, it's hard to figure out which one to address first. Before we get started, we'd like to send our condolences to the family of Tommy Jude. We will have a moment of silence. Rock on in paradise, friend. Now, there's something we spotted in one of those police incident reports that just keeps adding pieces to the puzzle. Let's just jump right in, no time to waste. Interesting enough, this report is from none other than the head honcho himself, Chief Fry. This should be good.
Quote, on December 13th, 2022, at approximately 2000 hours, I interviewed unknown in such and such, Idaho, at the such and such. Now, briefly, why is the city blocked out? Is that Boise? If so, there are a lot of college students from Boise, and I could definitely see why they would block out Moscow, too close for comfort. Anywho, I asked unknown if the information he would be sharing would be dealing with one person. Unknown, to me, it would. So this one person apparently is the person of interest. I asked unknown if I could get the individual's name. Unknown told me the person's name was unknown or unknown, later identified as unknown. Okay, so apparently this person passed away in 2003, or it appears it could be the person's mother, right? Let's continue. Unknown told me this apartment is just off of blank Avenue, then turn onto Linda Lane, and then right onto blank Street. Hold on, let's briefly see exactly where this is. Now, it appears this would be the apartments on Linda Lane. The apartments are just off of blank Avenue. This seems to be Taylor Avenue, then turn onto, well, it's obvious this is Linda Lane. And then right onto blank Street. This would be just a small neighborhood extension of Linda Lane. So whoever this is, or whoever the person being interviewed is informing Moscow PD about, lives in the apartments on Linda Lane. Keep this in mind. Quote, unknown began explaining to me that he had a lot of work for unknown, who was the prior owner of such and such. Unknown told me he has been a friend of the family for many years and has done handyman jobs in the past for unknown. Unknown told me in 2020, he drove unknown, his daughter unknown, and unknown up to such and such to a place the family goes to have a vacation almost every year. Unknown told me after they got there, unknown, who is one of unknown's sisters, got into an altercation with a male who was camped near where they were. Unknown told me it was a heated argument, but everyone eventually went back to their campsites. Okay, before we continue, this individual is talking about an incident that happened in 2020, but this is related to whoever stays in Linda Lane apartments. Now let's scroll down a bit as it becomes relevant to the victims. Quote, unknown told me around the end of May or sometime into the middle of June, after Clover was letting up, that's what we call it by the way, he was at the Mad Greek having a late lunch or early dinner. Unknown told me this was on a Saturday or a Sunday. Okay, now we know sometimes it's hard to remember specifics, but he didn't know if it was the end of the month of May or sometime in the middle of June. Didn't know if it was a late lunch or early dinner. Didn't know if it was a Saturday or Sunday. But he remembered other specifics that would seem a bit more difficult to remember. Unknown told me he had ordered a glass of wine, which he is sure that Ethan brought him. So Ethan is linked to whoever this individual is. Unknown told me he is not sure if Ethan worked at Mad Greek or was just helping out. This is starting to sound a bit suspicious if you ask me. So this guy wasn't sure if Ethan worked at Mad Greek or not? Did he say anything to you when he brought over the wine? Then he says Ethan may have been just helping out. Oh, so they were understaffed that evening. Ethan's girl worked there, so they asked him to help out a bit. Oh, okay. Unknown told me a bit later he noticed that Unknown had come into the restaurant with possibly Unknown, who is Unknown's cousin. Unknown told me Xana and Madison had gone over to Unknown's table, and Ethan later joined them. So this is still in 2020, apparently. Unknown told me it appeared to be a heated conversation, but he could not tell what it was about. Who is this person? Because they know of Ethan, Xana, and Madison. Unknown suspected it may have had to do with the, quote, cancel culture, unquote, and that Unknown was stirring them up with conservative comments. You just said you couldn't tell what it was about, and all of a sudden you suspected it was about something specific, something political. There would be something said that stands out, as he mentions the individual was stirring them up with conservative comments. So you do know what the conversation was about. This person is giving off the same vibes of Batman. Unknown told me Unknown left without eating anything. Seems there was underlying resentment floating around. Later that night, around 9 to 10 p.m., Unknown was at Unknown's house in his backyard. Okay, let's stop again and point something out. These are males. This individual being interviewed is a male, the individual referred to as a male, and another male is also involved. Unknown said that Unknown was extremely drunk and she was yelling at Unknown. That appears to be the name Gabe. Might be wrong. Unknown said she stated, quote, "You are just a loser and you are going to spend your life in jail. You are ruining your life," unquote. Wow, talk about tough love. I'll leave the rest to my colleagues.
Wow, harsh words. Unknown was not sure what Unknown was referencing when she said this. Unknown told me that Unknown left right after this altercation and he did not see him again. Unknown told me Unknown goes on long walks and does not return until the early morning hours. Unknown told me he was over at Unknown's the next morning, picking up some tarps from a job he had been doing, and Unknown showed up. Unknown told me he asked Unknown what he does after he leaves, when his mom is yelling at him. You know, this is a lot of specific details for a time frame 2 years prior to the murders. Anywho, Unknown told him he goes over to the college. Unknown told me Unknown believes the college is to blame for how his mom is. Again, let's stop. I know this doesn't seem all that important right now, but Ethan, Xana, and Madison were involved, and there is a male who stays in Linda Lane Apartments. Unknown explains that Unknown went to parties at the college and began drinking. Unknown told me he does not know for sure, but believes that Unknown may have been raped at one of the college parties. Whoever that female is, her name starts with an L. Unknown told me he asked Unknown about the conversation that took place at the Mad Greek restaurant. Unknown said that Unknown told him that he had followed the girls to the Mad Greek from college. Unknown told Unknown that the two girls were lesbians. Unknown told Unknown he had went back to the girls' house, and when they came home, he was inside the house and made the statement, quote, "They had no idea that I was there. I could have killed them all if I had wanted to." What the hell? There's a bit more. Unknown told me Unknown then went and got a larger knife from out of the back shed and showed him. Unknown told me every time he was around Unknown and Unknown's mom would explode on him, he always stayed very calm and would not react to her. Unquote. Now Chief Fry has a suspect, clear as day. And you want to know why this male is a suspect? Because the two females he deemed lesbians are Xana and Madison. Yup. Let's break it down with process of elimination.
If we go back to the incident at Mad Greek, the two females that Unknown had the exchange with were Xana and Madison. Pay close attention here. This is a suspect clear as day, and Chief Fry has the information. Quote, Unknown told me a bit later he noticed Unknown had come into the restaurant with possibly Unknown, who is his cousin. Unknown told me Xana and Madison had gone over to Unknown's table, and Ethan later joined them. Unknown told me it appeared to be a heated conversation. Unknown then had left without eating anything. Now, is there any other females mentioned here other than Xana and Madison? Nope. Then Unknown asked him what was the altercation about at Mad Greek, and he told him he had followed the girls from the college. Yes, he had followed Xana and Madison to Mad Greek. Is it possible that Kaylee being stalked was used as a misdirection to make it appear it was a lone killer? Because clearly there are two of the victims being targeted here, Xana and Madison. And since Ethan was there, well, he's on the target list, way of relativity. Early on, the mainstream media tried to focus on Kaylee mainly and claims she had been stalked. Yet even with that narrative, it doesn't explain why there were 4 victims, you see. But it was still pushed as the narrative to make it appear it was a lone killer. Once again, that lone killer doesn't have interest in the other 3 victims, so why murder them? They had to push that narrative because if this sealed document had been known about early on, obviously there were multiple killers and multiple targets, which destroys the lone killer narrative. This individual was in the home and stated he could have killed them all if he wanted to. Now, it sounds foolish for him to say such a thing, just blatantly like that, but those college students clearly had emotional and mental issues. Now, this male stays in Linda Lane Apartments. This incident was in 2020, but something tells me that this was not enough for a motive. We still believe it was drug-related, yet this male was perhaps already assigned to take the housemates out, Xana and Madison, and Ethan as well. Then someone else was assigned to take Kaylee out. The drug cartel would use a bunch of knife-wielding frat guys, who definitely know how to use them to kill as they are trained hunters, to take those housemates out. Bonnie and Clyde merely oversee the hit, and then you have law enforcement covering everything up. No wonder all of this was sealed. There's a suspect here just screaming, "I'm one of the killers. I even said I could do it. Just sneak into their home when they're not there." But then again, maybe someone gave him the code, easy access. In addition, where was any activity or incident more recent to the murders in 2022? This all apparently happened in 2020. The male stays in Linda Lane Apartments, threatened to kill Xana and Madison, and Ethan is beaten or even murdered in the Linda Lane surveillance around 2:20 a.m. Chief Fry, you cowardly dog. Suspects right under your nose, and you decided to look the other way? Fucking pathetic. There's an individual who was interviewed whose name starts with a P, another individual whose name starts with a D, and last name ends with a K. You have an individual whose name starts with an L, who was related to the previous individual, and you have the monster whose name starts with a G. Whoever this monster is was right behind the victim's home in Linda Lane Apartments. If anyone has information on these individuals, feel free to share the names, because clearly Moscow PD didn't think much of them. And how convenient that this interview came exactly a month after the murders, and after Chief Fry had already visited Pullman snooping around tracking Kohlberger. Never mind, the fact that someone had gone into the victim's home and told a friend he could have killed 2 of the victims at that point, had a ton of knives, had followed them from school to their job. They're cleared? Nothing to see here? Some have suggested that maybe Kohlberger pled guilty to allow information to seep out. They would unseal everything thinking they got away with it, only to be exposed later for framing an innocent man through the documents they never thought would come back to haunt them. There's no expiration date on karma, my friends. This is the Chaos Sector.